Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I want to welcome everyone for being here tonight for this very incredible event, the launch of We've Got This, Stories by Disabled Parents. Tonight is brought to you by Encompass Community Services Geelong and Disabled Mums, presented in partnership with Geelong Regional Library Corporation. The Geelong Regional Library Corporation acknowledges the Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma as the original owners of the lands in which their library services operate. They pay respects to Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma elders past, present and emerging. They acknowledge and celebrate the First Nations peoples of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. I also want to acknowledge the traditional lands of the traditional owners of the land in which I'm coming to you from tonight, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to any person who identifies as someone with a disability here tonight. I'll be your panel host here tonight. My name is Nas Campanella, and I'm really excited to be discussing this incredible book, We've Got This, Stories by Disabled Parents. If I can just start by providing you with a bit of background about myself. So I am the ABC's National Disability Affairs reporter. Before that, I was a newsreader and reporter for Triple J and the wider ABC platforms for about 7 years. I am also a public speaker and presenter. I am also a very proud mum to 8-week-old Lachlan, who was born in February, 37 weeks, a little bit early. And, one of those things where you think you've got everything ready to go and then it happens and all of a sudden you realize my hospital bag isn't packed and, we still need to go out and buy some things and set up the room. And anyway, I only had 1 week of maternity leave to myself, but here we are and he's beautiful and growing and doing really well. So if you hear any crying in the background, it is because he is getting ready for a feed. So I do apologize, but it really is quite fitting that Lockie is in the background tonight as we launch this incredible book. I also just want to give a little audio description of myself. I am a white woman with dark brown hair. I have my hair in a ponytail tonight. I have fair skin. I am wearing a black jacket and an orange sort of top underneath. I have my beautiful curtains in the background, not the most amazing sort of backdrop. Before we go any further, there are just a few sort of housekeeping things, but also, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for tonight. Let's start with Nicole. Nicole Lee is a family violence survivor and disability activist. She's appeared on You Can't Ask That and The Drum. She's been published by Mamma Mia, and from 2016 to 2018, she was on Victoria's... Oh, everything is stalling for me, but from 2016 to 2018, she was on Victoria's First Victim Survivors Advisory Council. Nicole is one of the contributors to We've Got This. So welcome, Nicole.
Thanks for having me here. It's really good to be here. So I'm sitting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and any that we may have with us in the discussion tonight. I'm a white woman with some really bad lighting and very black behind me. I have a tube across my nose and I'm wearing across my face into my nose, and I'm wearing a red and white striped t-shirt as well.
Thank you, Nicole, and welcome. Eliza Hull is a musician, writer, journalist and disability advocate, and was a contributor to Growing Up Disabled in Australia. Her podcast series on parenting with a disability, We've Got This, was one of Radio National and ABC Life's most successful series of all time. And of course, it is also the same name of this incredible book that we are launching here tonight. Eliza, warm welcome to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and being part of this event, Naz. And thanks so much to Nicole also. I am on the lands of the Jara people, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Djadjarwurrung people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Tonight I'm sitting in my kitchen living room. You can see a white light behind me. I have fair skin and brown hair. I've got it up in a bun tonight. I'm wearing a black jacket and a maroon top underneath with black dots.
Fantastic. Warm welcome to Eliza. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get the discussion underway. Tonight's live webinar features automated captions. We also do have Auslan interpretation, two of our fantastic interpreters, Priscilla and Jamila. Thank you for being here tonight. You can also participate in this webinar by clicking on the Q&A button and typing your question or comment. You might need to touch your screen first to see that Q&A function if you are using an iPhone or an iPad. Also, this webinar is being recorded. If you'd like to listen or watch this discussion at a later date, or recommend it to friends, of course, it will be uploaded to the library's YouTube channel within the next couple of days. So without further ado, let's get the discussion underway. I guess the best place to start really is with you, Eliza, and why you wanted to do this book.
So the reason I wanted to do this book really came from my need for a book like this. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was searching far and wide for a collection of stories where I felt represented. I really just wanted to know what it would be like to be a parent with a disability. And everywhere I searched online, I found stories that, in my opinion, weren't accurate. Often it was portrayed that it would be a burden for children to have a parent with a disability. And so I really just wanted to, A, create a sense of community, and B, have stories like this so that I could feel less alone in my decision to parent. And I think that stems from the discrimination that I faced in the medical system when I was considering having children. It's a pretty exciting time in your life. And I remember feeling that excitement and really just going in to speak to him because I trusted him. He was my neurologist for a very long time. And when I said to him that, I really want to have kids, I was met with judgment. And I just remember him looking at me and with a very confused look on his face and saying that he didn't think it would be a possibility for me. And he thought it would be too hard for me to be a parent with a disability. He also questioned why I would consider having children because I have a 50% chance of passing on my disability. And so I realized at that moment, when I felt very vulnerable, that spaces like that, the medical spaces, is really where we need to see change and shift attitudes. And so I actually hope that this book will be both for those spaces for non-disabled people, but also for disabled people that are wondering what it will be like to be a parent with disability, or potentially have faced discrimination or faced people stating that they shouldn't be a parent or can't be a parent. I hope that this makes them realise that they can.
Yeah, look, you mentioned discrimination there, and all the contributors had some form of anecdote of experiencing that within their stories within the book. I wonder, could you talk us through a little bit about the process of deciding to become a mum and overcoming some of those things? I mean, it would have been heartbreaking to hear some of those comments from that neurologist, a person who is supposed to be have your best interest at heart. Yeah,
I remember at that time, if I'm completely honest, I really did start to question, can I be a mother? Like, will it be too hard? But luckily I have a really good support network, my family, and an incredible partner who just, made me, I guess, brought me home really, and made me realize that I can be a parent. And I think that having disability in our home and being a disabled mother really makes our home great. And I think that my children, I know my daughter is really a very kind and open person, and I think that really stems from having a mother with a disability.
Nicole, let's go to you. What sort of attitudes or barriers did you face when you became a mum? And you were a mum pretty early on in your life.
Yeah. So I was a mum for the first time when I was 18. So it's really hard for me at times to differentiate the difference between what was stigma around my age and what was stigma around my disability. The big barriers I faced, especially with my first, because I was young, and less with my second, was around people not acknowledging that this was my child, people thinking that I was babysitting for my sister. I was always very, very conscious that I was being watched and monitored, whether it was the maternal and child health nurse, being out at the shops. I was very, very particular, making sure my children were beautifully dressed and always clean, and so that maybe I could, turn around some of their, stigma-laden thoughts and judgments around the irresponsible young mother, that this isn't capable of taking care of a child, or maybe I just wanted to go out and party, when, it was the complete opposite. When I became a mother, it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I loved it. It was so natural. It was something that I'd always wanted to do. And it's not something I regret doing at a young age either. But that stigma of being a young mother is something that has stayed with me for a very long time. So people's attitudes when I was with my child was like, oh, you're too young to be that child's mother. I get when I go out without my child and being in a wheelchair, and even to this day, oh, you've got children too? Wow. Like, yes, I do. It's not a big deal. They're really sort of things that sort of build up on you over time, which then create, barriers in all sorts of other directions. But there was something else I was going to say there, sorry. And then when it came to having my second child, and I thought all that stigma had gone, and I thought, I'm a bit older now, it's going to be completely different. And it was like, how are you going to care for a baby? Or how are you going to carry the baby? How are you going to look after them? How are you going to change their nappy? How are you going to carry them around the house and get them in the car? How are you going to go being pregnant? And then I got the ableist stigma. And I thought I'd left all that stigma behind. I'm 24. I was 24. I'm a bit, and it was really quite confronting, that no matter what I did, people were going to judge me. And, and that does have an impact on people, when they're having children, with disabilities or at a younger age. And it's one of the things I wasn't capable of pushing back on at the time either. I was really very, I'd fall into that submissive, passive Nicole person who would smile and go, I'm okay. Yes, I'm his mother. I actually confront what they were saying. I was much younger. I wasn't who I am now. I didn't have the language to articulate all the different things that I can now. But I also had, as a lot of disabled people, experienced, sort of different points in time of such disempowering experiences across my lifetime, which then, flowed into my motherhood journey around, still feeling disempowered, still feeling like I was on the back foot, and still feeling like I had to smile and nod at people, even when, sort of copying those very, stigma-laden comments and judgments placed on me.
We're here with Eliza Hull, the editor of We've Got This, Stories by Disabled Parents, also a musician, writer and disability advocate, and Nicole Lee, family violence survivor advocate and writer and contributor to the book as well. If you have any questions or comments you would like to make, please put them in the Q&A section of this website, and we will get to those when we go to the audience questions at around 8:15. Looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about this incredible discussion and these women and what they have to say, and also any questions you might have. I'm, as I said, a new mum. My baby was born 8 weeks ago, and I guess in a sense, what I loved most about this book is how solutions-based all the stories felt. At one point or another, everyone had said what they were using, whether it be services, support, equipment, in order to be a parent and parent their child in their unique way. And so I think for me, when I was thinking about becoming a parent, and then when I actually got pregnant, finding all of those supports and services and equipment felt like one of the most important things I needed to do, not only for myself, but I felt like I needed to prove to everybody else that I had organized all of these things to be an equal parent to my husband, but also parent in the way that was safe, and so everyone else had confidence in me. I think for some of the things that I used, I chose to have a specific change table with high sides so that my baby doesn't roll off. I've got lots of tactile books and toys and things that make noise. We've got sort of squeaky shoes when he starts moving around. All these things that a parent who is blind can use when they, in order to parent. But also I've got a secondary disability called Charcot-Marie-Tooth. It's a neurological condition which affects my balance and my sensitivity. And so that meant that in order to be able to safely carry my baby around the house and mobilize while doing that, I needed to do lots of sort of exercise physiology and exercise and really build up strength in my arms and my legs. And that's how I've been able to now carry him around the house. I wonder what you, Eliza, and Nicole used in terms of just preparing for when your babies arrived. Eliza, if we go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I was really this is speaking to the NDIS issue, but I remember, wanting to get a certain bath to be able to give my baby a bath. And I spoke to the NDIS about getting this certain bath, but they deemed it as not something that related to my disability, even though parenting is clearly part of my life and part of my goals. They saw it as something that wasn't related. So that was a real shame. And I think it actually knocked my confidence. And so, yeah, there wasn't really a time that I ever gave my baby a bath, which I really regret. So I just would do things in certain other ways, like have a bath with my baby. Also, I mean, I haven't used technology, but do things, I modify the way that I parent. So for instance, going down steps, my son and I will go just one by one, just sitting on the steps, just so it's safe. Or when I'm getting, this was very early on, but when I was getting my son Archie out of the car, or my daughter Isabel, I would lean up against the car so that the car takes my weight and then pull my baby safely out of the car, which is, gets a lot of people staring, but it's the way to do it that's really safe, and it just is the way that works for us. So yeah, I think there hasn't been really any technology that I've used, but there are ways that I modify my parenting to really make sure that I'm doing it in a way that works for us, in a way that's safe. But a lot of the stories within the book use different technology, or really just different hacks on ways that they parent. And I think, for instance, there are two parents that are blind in the book, and they used veterinary syringes because it was the exact right amount. So they knew that that was the right amount of formula to mix. They also discovered a machine that was able to mix the right amount of formula. So that again was something that really helped them. Also using a pram tow, so a way that they could tow their pram and have it buckled to them, and tow the pram behind them, and have their guide dog or their cane in front of them as they're walking. So there are those kind of ways. Also parents that are deaf within the book who used a vibration pack around them as the alarm was going off. They would feel the vibration or see visual cues of the light flashing, so that they knew that their baby was making noise or crying. So there are definitely great ways that parents can adapt. And I think as people with disability, we are incredible problem solvers, and we are very flexible and quite creative, because we have to be, really. I think I've learned that throughout my life as a person with disability, that I constantly have to figure out ways to do things that maybe are a little bit different. And I think that then makes us great parents, because all parenting really requires that, and especially when you have a disability.
Yeah, I think it's easy to be a problem solver when there are no sort of specific bits of equipment out there when you go to the baby stores, and you know there's nothing for you. Nicole, you had an experience in a baby store. Do you want to share that?
Oh my goodness, I had many experiences in baby stores, but you know, my first being before the internet, and so literally having to drive from baby store to baby store, and sort of explain to somebody, you know, this is what I need a piece of equipment to do, and it needs to be this high, it needs to be able to do X, Y, Z, and having them just completely ignore that, speak to my mother, and start showing me all the popular items and completely dismissing all the things that I'd said, and that was frustrating. By the time I came around to Emmett, you know, adapting things like, which I didn't talk about in the book, you know, adapting things like making it so I could lower down the side of the cot from a seated position, because some of the times you had to push a leg into them and lift and then pull it down. So getting a volunteer, because it's before the NDIS, to come out and work out a way around how do I lower the cot, how do I put a safety gate up that I can get through. So I had barn door hinges on this safety gate that used to swing backwards and forwards for me to get in and out of the room, different rooms of the house. You know, and you know, lots and lots of different things. So trying to find the right sling, you know, that I could, you know, put my baby in my sling and wheel around the house or wheel around out at the shops, but then realizing that when they start to get a bit bigger, they get way too heavy for that. So I had a friend that I used to buy my wheelchairs off, and he mocked up this, and he still does accessible equipment for parents in wheelchairs now. It's Mobility Plus. I don't talk to him anymore, but anyway, but he put these lugs on the front of my chair, and those very simple, basic high chairs that hook onto the table, that have been around for yonkies years, that hooked onto the front of my wheelchair, and then I could wheel around with my youngest in that, in front of me, as long as I had a big heavy bag on the back so I didn't tip forward. And I had that freedom again. And as Eliza said, it's being, you know, inventive and adaptive with a lot of things. And, you know, unlike yourself, Naz, I had to change, I had a change mat that I could move around the house. So change tables were just far too high, too awkward for me to use. So putting the change mat on the couch and sitting on the floor and changing them, or the change mat on the bed or on the floor itself, and just lots of little things like that. I spent a lot of time on the floor. It just seemed easier, and I am in a wheelchair. And one of the other really cool things that mums in wheelchairs that I did find that I could do, which I think I discussed this with Naz before tonight, was that, you know, and I don't know whether I haven't had discussion with other mothers in wheelchairs, was that I was able to, because my youngest was very relaxed and easy around the house, I put one of my legs up right across my other leg, so it was in a up on top of me. He would, or she would lay down on that spot, and then I'd also be able to lean forward and breastfeed and wheel around the house at the same time, which is something other mothers don't get the privilege of being able to do. So
Multitasking.
Yeah, multitasking. So there were some ways, like being in the wheelchair, that actually made some of those things a lot easier for me. Yeah, and I think, like I saw in like, or Eliza said, you know, hopping in the bath and having a bath with your baby, and the change mat on the floor outside of the bath. So then having the towel on that, popping them down there, wrapping them up, getting myself out, you know, and yeah, we're really, really quite clever at doing workarounds with everything. That's been our whole life, so that's what we continue to do.
What about in terms of services? I know there were some, I guess, services that I really wasn't aware of, and maybe I hadn't even thought about it. But one of the things I guess I was most scared about was, I guess, losing my independence. I can't use a pram. For me, I've got my cane in one hand, but I also have the added bonus of the neurological condition, which means I can't necessarily, I don't have the sort of body strength and balance to safely tow a pram behind me either. So that option is not for me. And then because of the distribution of weight, I can't carry my baby on the front of me like many other mums do in a sling type scenario. So getting out of the house with my baby at the moment really does require another person to come with us and to push our pram, and you know, we do it together. And I guess losing my independence was something I worried about, but I've discovered that doulas are really great. They do lots of postpartum support now. And one of the things I've got a doula for is to make sure that my baby and I aren't isolated in the house when my hubby's at work, and so that I don't have to also always rely on friends and family to come and take us for a coffee or walk up to the park or get some groceries. You know, in a couple of weeks, we're going to rhyme time at the library or a sensory play class. And so that's been really important for me. Were there any sort of services that you sort of came across, Eliza, in parenting your two kiddies, Isabel and Archie?
No, I mean, like when you said about a doula, like that's amazing. I didn't know anything about that until you mentioned. I thought doula was related more to the birth itself. So I wish that I knew about that. I guess my doula was my mother-in-law. She's been a massive present help in my life. Also, just I guess NDIS support. So having that support system in my house, like having someone that can clean the house and enable me to, I guess, be a better parent, because I'm less fatigued and I'm less in pain because of having those supports in place. I think the thing that probably has helped, not necessarily like physical supports, but more community supports. So online, just there's a Facebook page called Disabled Parenting Project, and also the Facebook page Disabled Mums. And I think just seeing these conversations constantly roll in on Facebook every day, where we just share just things that we're doing, or things that we, what do you think about this, or how could I do this, or even just having just that someone to chat to, and that support system has been really, really helpful, because you do feel, I guess, just less alone, and it's just having someone that you can bounce those ideas off.
Nicole, sometimes as women with disabilities, we do require some support in other areas that maybe other mums don't. And how do you navigate that when you need your children to help you with some of those tasks? How do you sort of balance not wanting to make them your carer and burden them with that, but also trying to I guess, in a sense, teach them that, if mummy needs something, it's actually okay to help as well. How did you navigate that with your kids? And did you have to?
I guess it was really a lot independent with my children when they were much younger. There weren't a lot of services around, so there wasn't a lot of supports pre-NDIS. And unfortunately, I did try to navigate that with my oldest. It was really tricky, and at one point he was thrown into that position of being my carer, due to just what we were living with and what was going on for us in our home at that time. And it's trying to get that balance between where they're helping you and they don't feel like they are the one that has to take over everything, or they feel like they're being punished for somebody else's actions, and all of a sudden they have to do all the things around the house. I don't think I struck that balance very well, but then we were in a bit of a crisis situation. And it's trying to sort of get that responsibility that all kids have to have around, usually have around, house chores, helping mum around the house, versus being made to be your sole carer, which is very damaging on parent and child relationships. And this is one of the things that is the beauty of the NDIS coming in, is that we do have those. If you've got a substantial package and you've got support work in there, it takes away that feeling on them where they feel responsible or they feel obligated to do all of those things. It made it really difficult to discipline my child when I also then needed to get them to help me get the little brother to, my youngest to school, or to help me with more personal tasks and things, or get in and out of bed, or put the bins out. So it was very difficult, really, very, very difficult, in that it did impact our relationship a lot. And it's something that if I could go back in time, not that I really had any other options, unfortunately, at that point in time, it's, the beauty of having these informal supports under NDIS, if you're able to access a package, is that you're no longer putting that constantly on your children. And so you can go back to having just a normal parent-child relationship where, kids do chores around the house, but they don't feel that, it's dire if they don't. And you can actually discipline your child without fear of them saying, well, I'm not putting the bins out for you, or that's it, I'm not speaking to you. And you actually need them to do something, and it's diabolical that they don't, if they don't, kind of thing. So, one of the big shifts I found when I've had Alfred now as my grandson, is that now I have a support worker that can come in and help me with him. I have a support worker that can come and help me access the community with Alfred, and go into meetings and things. And Alfred was coming along with me at one. Such a different experience too with my own children.
Yeah, you must really see.
Sorry, what was that, Naz?
That's okay. We lost you there for a brief moment, but we're fine
sorry.
now. But you must have noticed a difference between the services available when you were a mum versus now being a grandma, and how has that shaped, I guess, the grandma that you are?
I feel that I can be more involved. I'm a bit older now, so I'm not as agile and as energetic and fit as I was when I was younger. And I certainly can't chase him the way that I used to be able to chase kids and pet and pick him up and bath him and access the community. So I feel more supported, and I feel much safer going out when I can, sort of say to my support worker, to hire her for the day to come into the city with me, with him and push the pram so that I'm not expending energy. Then it means I've got more energy to be with my grandson. I actually brought him to the Melbourne launch recently, and I did go on my own, but he's a little bit older now and he's a bit more active, and he understands that he needs to walk beside Nana, and he needs to not run away from me and hold on to the back of my chair. And but it's been that very, very different journey with Alfred than it was with my other children, with my children, that is. And it would have been beautiful to have had that at that point in time. It would have taken, the big difference is that they would have taken a lot of reliance off myself and on my partner, which is one of those things that if the relationship is not healthy with you and your partner, then and you don't have any other formal or informal supports, then that creates a barrier to leaving an unhealthy relationship. And that was one of the things that I had, that I didn't have the resources, the supports or capacity to parent on my own at that point in time. And so I didn't leave for a lot of reasons. There's lots of other ableist reasons around, relationships and disability, but fear of not being able to parent, fear of losing my children. And they are very real fears for disabled people, and I think that has been discussed in bits and pieces in the book around fear of losing your children, because that is a big reality for us. And if this had happened at a different point in time when I did have NDIS, it might have been a very, very different story. I might have had the ability to leave earlier if I didn't have that fear of losing my children, didn't have that fear of being a parent.
And you've raised several really important issues there. If I can go to Eliza, if I can just quickly circle back to the question around the caring role and that responsibility. I mean, it is one of the things that I sort of think about in the future of I'm going to need Lockie to do, several things for me, but how do you balance that with being, the parent-child relationship?
Yeah, I find like it's such an interesting subject, isn't it? Yeah, I think just echoing what Nicole said, it's like you don't want it to affect your relationship basically with your child. That's predominantly, you don't want it to become a problem really. But I think that it's okay for children, I think in a way it's kind of almost ableist to think that it's always a negative for your child to help or to care, because actually they're just really great qualities for a child to learn. And I know for me it feels really lovely to be cared for by my daughter, and an example is that at the moment she basically pulls me along the street so that we make the time to get across when the lights are red and we're crossing the road, but yeah, she just does it in such a caring way, and she always, helps me and moves the toys on the floor so I don't trip and fall. If I do fall, she's always there helping me up. I just think that, there's those kind of things that is actually what makes really beautiful and kind children. And there are examples in the book where, for instance, Brent Phillips is a man that's deaf, and he speaks to his kids just, being in the fish and chip shop and saying, "Please, Dad, can we interpret tonight? Can we please interpret for you tonight?" So they wanted to, have the order for the fish and chips, and Brent, said, "Yeah, that's fine," but he didn't want it to be that they always are there interpreting for him. He didn't want it to always feel like they had to do that, and he also wanted to show them that he's capable and that he, is out there in the community without them, and it's all fine. So I think it's just that balance act of,
And what about things like, I know my mum used to, carpool. If another mum had to stay back late at work, she'd take their kids home and vice versa. Play dates, all those sorts of things. I guess I worry a little bit that other parents won't trust that I'll be able to have their kids over for play dates, because somehow they perceive that because I have disability that I wouldn't be able to. Have either of you come across that? And if so, how have you navigated that?
Do you want to speak to that, Nicole? Or?
Across it was I guess it's something you always worry about and fear, but I didn't have any problems with those sorts of things. One thing, I live close to the school, so I didn't do any carpooling, but my children certainly had friends over, and I know I had fears around joining my first mums group for the first time, and being worried about being judged as being young and being disabled and stuff, and I found for the most part that I didn't receive that kind of sort of judgment from other parents or fear that I wasn't capable of looking after them. If anything, my youngest had I think it might have been their 8th birthday or 9th birthday, where all the parents decided that they just dropped their children off because my child's birthday is near Christmas and they were going Christmas shopping. So I ended up with 28-year-olds that I had to then wrangle. And boy, God, I wish somebody had have realised that, had that thought that, oh, I wonder whether she's capable. You know what? I wasn't capable of looking after that many children in my backyard for a couple of hours. And that was on disability. I couldn't run after them, and it was really hot. But no, I think that's one of the things you worry and fear about, not being accepted. But, for the most part, it was really good, and parents were quite accepting. And I find more, I got accepted into that tribe of womanhood almost, because, oh, you're doing one. Even when I was pregnant, when I had little children attached to me, you then become a woman like everybody else. It's when my children weren't with me, and I'd say I had children, like, oh, you've got kids, really? Oh, wow. That's when I'd get that, and I'd all of a sudden be less of a woman with people, or less, like them, like the other mothers, than, because my children weren't with me. And that's really something that we need to sort of unpack and look at the complexities of. But I felt quite accepted into this, if for want of better words, is this tribe of mothers and women whilst I was pregnant and whilst I had little children around me by other mothers, versus just being myself without them with me.
Yeah, I was the same. Like I was worried about it, and I have been worried about it, maybe especially around driving. Like driving other children, because of my disability affects my feet and my legs, predominantly. But I think, it was all internal worries. I think the only time I've ever seen it play out is when I have asked to hold a friend's baby. So that's probably the only time, like if we're all together in the house, and because I have I'm not very balanced, I guess you could say, and also have muscle loss in my hands. I've just seen that kind of nervous energy around that. And when I've said, I'll come and sit down, and then that's when I just see them relax, and it's okay, everything will be okay. So, but in terms of other mothers or parents, fathers trusting me with their kids, they've just been incredible, and almost the opposite. And just been really wonderful community.
I've got a few more burning questions, but we might throw to some from the audience now. We've got one from Peter. I'm a mum with cerebral palsy. How will you explain to your kids about your own disability? Eliza, maybe you first, because I know you've sort of already done this, haven't you?
Yeah, the first time that my daughter noticed my disability, she just said to me, like, why do you walk like a penguin all the time? She just obviously thought I was just being really fun and pretending to be an animal. That was when she was very little, and she just didn't understand. And that was the first time that I said, I've got a disability, and I explained it to her. So I think I just say I'm disabled. I have a disability. We have lots of books in our home that represent disabled people. We talk about disability all the time. And she's just really proud to have a disabled mum. And I think I did mention this in the book, that it really, I guess, hit home was when I was in the kindergarten line, and a child said to their parent, why does she walk like that? And what's wrong with her? And the parent said that I'd been in an accident. And this particular parent and I had many conversations around disability. And I just, at that moment wanted to actually say, no, that's not true. I wasn't in an accident. I'm disabled, but we were, pulled along the line at the time. So I didn't get a chance, but my daughter, as we were walking in, said, that's not right. You're disabled, and you're a disabled mum. And it really made me feel very proud that she was using that word. And I think that that's really just how we talk about it, is I just really explain it. And I, read her the Growing Up Disabled chapter that I wrote, and read her parts of my writing, and speak to her often about my disability and also the wider disability issues.
We've got another question from Kate. In regards to assistive technology, did you find it all on your own, or did an OT or someone similar assist you with that? Nicole?
It was a lot of figuring it out on my own. So I did have support from the OTs at the Royal Talbot here in Melbourne that were really brilliant. But as it was finding something that was adaptable. So they just sort of had ideas, and they helped me with those ideas, or with connecting me with the volunteers that helped with modifying the cot back then. But it was a matter of going to the shops, finding things, fiddling around with them. There were a few things that I wasted my money on that got it home and realized that no, it just really wasn't doing what I wanted it to do or needed it to do. But yeah, it was that hitting the ground, you sort of and going to different shop to shop to see, what they had, what was different, what was, usable for me, or what could easily be modified for me to use, unfortunately, and as Eliza said, the whole point in writing this book was to connect with other parents. So there weren't other disabled parents that I could ask questions of, well, what did you do? Or what did you find useful? Or which was the best pouch for your shoulders that wasn't going to kill your shoulders if they get heavier? What's the most comfortable thing to wear, easiest thing to wear to use? And that was, that real trial and error kind of thing, unfortunately. And that's where these online groups and forums, when you can share ideas around assistive technology, really come into their own. And have a lot of value.
Nicole, when do you think your children realised that you had a disability?
I'm not really sure. I don't recall them ever really asking me a lot of questions about it. It's just that mummy's in a wheelchair, and that's all there was to it. And I guess my wheelchair for them was a lot of fun. Now I get to watch my grandson wheel around in my wheelchair and take off and leave me on the couch. I'm like, Alfred, come back. But no, they didn't really have, any burning questions, and they were quite happy and proud to say to the other kids at school, your mum's in a wheelchair, and that I was doing sport back then. So they were really happy to, and proud to tell people that, my mum is, going over to Canada to swim for Australia, and all of those sorts of things. So, it wasn't something that they were embarrassed about. I think my oldest copped it once when he went to high school, and somebody said, disabled people, because their father is also disabled, not that I talk about him much, but for all sorts of reasons. But another kid at the school saying, but disabled people can't have parents, especially two of them. And he got really frustrated and didn't know how to respond to that because like it was clearly wrong because both of his parents were disabled. Yeah, so I think over the years they kind of picked up on, you know, what my disability was, you know, by listening to discussions and things, but it wasn't something that they were really sort of, you know, sort of, hey, what's wrong with you kind of thing. Yeah, and I wonder whether Alfred will ask me one day what's wrong with me. Recently, my youngest asked me, what does the tube do? How does my pump work? You know, and asked me all the ins and outs around that kind of stuff. But, you know, outside of that, not a real lot of sort of curiosity, but I guess they pick up on things. They're listening to the conversations. They're curious little minds, and they're listening to everything that we do and say as well. They absorb everything around them.
I do love, Nicole, your story, if you can mention it, about when you were at like a bottom of the stairs. I love that story that you mentioned in the book.
Yeah, I hadn't realized it because my youngest has two parents with disabilities, and we used ramps everywhere, so we didn't use stairs. And she was probably about 3 at the time, and looked at the flight of stairs and just stood there confused and didn't know what to do. And it dawned on me, you've never seen somebody really walk upstairs, you don't know what these are. And just watching, you know, this toddler figure it out, just then eventually sat down and then sat on the step on their bum and then crawled up to the next step and was just doing this curious, you know, and did that over and over and over until eventually worked out I can hold onto the rail and do this stepping walking thing. But I guess the closest she would have seen to anyone using steps would have been me getting out of my chair, going up the steps on my bum and dragging my chair behind me, which is, you know, what I used to do, and I would still do. No one's carrying me up steps, put it that way. And I just sat there and just watched my child figure it out, and just thought, oh, that's so cute.
What I guess, you know, there are obviously lots of, you know, incredible benefits of having a mum with disability. What are some of the ones that I think, you know, I guess for me personally, some of the things that I've already noticed is that I have to be incredibly verbal with my son, probably more verbal than other mums are with their children, because I have to talk through everything we're doing, and I use it as a way of, I guess, calming him as well. I hope that he'll continue to listen to my voice, and that will kind of soothe him, you know, particularly when he's distressed while we're changing a nappy and it's a bit cold, or because I can't make eye contact with him or make those sort of facial expressions that maybe other mums do. That's one thing that I've sort of been using. Music is playing a really important role for us. I played him specific music when he was in my belly, and now I play that same music to him, and it really calms him down. It's almost like he remembers hearing that when he was in utero. Lots of squishy, soft, you know, toys that make noise and things like that. And I also think that, you know, my boy's going to realize that he needs to grab my hands to show me what he wants rather than pointing to things. Those are some of the things I think, you know, will benefit Lockie as he gets older, because he'll realize very quickly that there are different ways of doing things and there's not one specific way. What are some of the things, Eliza, that you have noticed with your children already?
Yeah, I mean, I write about this in the book, that I had this moment where Archie was like a baby, and the way that I move, as I walk, I rock back and forth. And I just, yeah, I mean, look, it probably was in my mind a little bit, but I just felt like maybe this is the thing that's soothing him to sleep as I move around the room, that back and forth of rocking. And I just, that to me was quite a beautiful moment. I guess the things now is that because I move slowly in the world, that we have more time to smell the flowers and, you know, look around. And I don't see that as a negative, that we get to places a lot slower. I think ultimately I'm raising children that don't see, you know, being different as a negative. They don't see disability as a bad thing or as something to fear. And they're kind kids that are really open to diversity. And I see that as truly a great thing.
What are some of the biggest issues facing disabled parents today, Eliza? And you would have heard and read about a lot of them, given the contributors that you had to sort of sift through.
I think the biggest is medical discrimination. So people facing social workers being called as soon as they give birth, or people with intellectual disability, 60% of those people have their children removed. And I think that is the biggest issue, because those parents, like, I think that parenting actually is a very isolating experience. I don't think that we raise children as a village anymore, anymore. A long time. It's been a long time like this. And I think that that's a real issue, because parenting is really hard and it's really challenging and it's very isolating and scary. And it's not like you get taught how to be a parent. And I think for parents with intellectual disability, there are added complexities. And so to be not given the appropriate support is, I just think, a huge issue. And there are parents within the book that say that they feel like they were set up to fail. They feel like they were being judged and being watched, and they weren't given the supports. One parent in this book, Heather Smith, speaks about having the one or two maternal health visit and not knowing how to be a parent, and really just seeking support so that she could be the parent that she knew that she could be. And unfortunately, she lost her child. And then there are parents in the book that had to fight to keep their child. And when they eventually were in court, the judge apologized and said, "I cannot believe that you are here. You are extremely capable parents." And not only that, like, you clearly display that how much love is in your home. And this is, I think, the biggest issue today, because child protection just straight away set these parents up to fail without giving them the adequate supports. And that's in my opinion the biggest issue. But I also think just medical discrimination and just attitudes. I think that the most challenging thing for a parent with a disability is not the home, it's what actually happens outside the home, and community discrimination, societal discrimination, and attitudes. And then also, I could keep going, but also pressure to test for genetics, for passing on disability, the pressure that we as people with disability ought to be considering that we wouldn't, shouldn't or wouldn't want to pass on disability, that we don't want disability in this world. I think that again is just a huge issue.
Another question from Jax, wondering how you all experience the gendered assumptions, expectations as women, and how this interacts with assumptions or stereotypes of disability, and how you resist or respond to that. Nicole, do you want to talk to that?
I think for disabled women and non-binary, and female identifying women, is that, there's all of these expectations in the world that we need to be cared for, that we have to be cotton-wooled, that we're not capable, that we have to be placed in the passive position, that there has to always be somebody there looking after us, doing things for us, doing things with us. Sorry, I must have finished. And that was quite pervasive, not being seen as an independent individual, and that comes with that intersect of gender and ableism that also is very prevalent when it comes to violence, and that was something that I did see, I did experience a lot, and especially when living in a violent relationship and wanting to leave that, or having to engage with services. I think there's a very real risk, and one of the things that we do face, and this is that gendered issue, is that when it comes to a custody battle, who they see as being the most prompt, able, capable parent, not necessarily based on any reality or any facts or or on us as individuals. And it's all based on those stigmas and stereotypes that, you know, that we need to be cared for, that we're not independent, we're not capable. And you know, and they do play out in those courtrooms, they do play out in those battles, and that's again one of those fears why we don't leave, because we don't want to lose our children. And that is a very, very gendered issue as well. And yeah, there's other stuff around gender that's probably not relevant to this conversation, yeah, too. But yeah, it being and if you are independent, then we get traipsed as being these fiercely stubborn independent women who just can't accept help. Well, maybe we need help, maybe we're actually quite capable, but we don't speak about disabled fathers this way. We don't speak about disabled men as needing support or needing people in our lives. Yeah, and that's where we have to look at this intersect of disableism and gender, and what impact that has on us in our roles as parents, and our ongoing, and now into sort of like that grandparent position as well. So disability and being a woman as well has come into question around my grandparenting ability in custody stuff and with courts and things more recently. I was quite shocked with that. I think I've proven myself. I've got 2 children to adult age. Does that not prove to the world that I'm a capable, independent woman? But we're not seen as that, and that's that societal stigma that is placed on us as and even if we we might be non-binary, but if we are female appearing and looking, then that stigma is then put on us, even though that's not actually an identity that we take on board either.
I think one of the things I found quite interesting is that people have been asking me, how do you think you'll go when your husband goes back to work and you're all alone in the house with the baby? Well, I sort of don't know how to respond, because it's like, well, what do you mean? I'm already doing it. He's not doing everything. I'm the one getting up for the midnight feed. I'm the one up at 3 o'clock in the morning changing a dirty nappy. It's a shared responsibility in our house, and that's the way I think it should be in everyone's house. And so look, I think we're sort of coming to the end of tonight's discussion. I think it would be really interesting if we ended with some advice. Maybe Nicole, will go to you first. Maybe some advice for me or for anyone else that's out there who has little kids at the moment or is thinking about having little kids, and they are a person with disability. What do you say to them?
Somebody more recently that has and they have a lot of pain associated with their disability and a lot of pain meds. And the advice that I gave her recently, which is very different to what we discussed the other night, Naz, was that the people around you really, really setting a boundary with, these are the things I can do and these are the things I want you to allow me to do. Whereas everybody wants to feel like they're doing the right thing when you're having a pain flare up, when you're not as well as normal. They want to then just step in and take over. But really setting a boundary with those sorts of things is the best advice I can give to other parents with disabilities. These are the things I can do and these are the things I want you to come to me with and allow me to continue to do as a parent, rather than stepping in. And I know you're trying to help, but please, respect, my parenting and let me do the things that I'm capable of doing, because that helps me bond with my child. And I think that was the best advice I could give to, like I gave to a friend more recently, and that I'd love to give to, other disabled parents as well, is, well intentions are great, but, sort of being very vocal around setting that boundary. I want to do this job. Thanks very much for helping, but let me do it.
And Eliza, if I can close with some advice from you, that would be great.
I think I would say, don't listen to the people that tell you can't or you shouldn't. Especially, medical system is very problematic. And if you can, just try and block that out as much as possible. And I think, just try and create community. I think as soon as I, really having children was the real catalyst for me being a proud disabled person, because I wanted to be authentic for my child. I want my child to feel like they can be whoever they are and whoever that they will become, and realize that it was time to model being authentic and being true to myself. And I think that as soon as I've done that, I've really opened myself up to an incredible community of people that are there for you and that make you feel less alone in your parenting journey, but also in terms of disability. So yeah, have good people in your corner and try and block out the people that don't matter or that you know, feed you with discrimination and ableist attitudes.
Thank you so much. Very wise words. And I want to thank you both for Nicole contributing to the book and Eliza editing and coming up with this incredible idea. It is certainly something that has given me great confidence over the last 8 weeks as my little one comes into the world and we navigate this incredible and sometimes challenging journey together. Thank you very much, Eliza Hull and Nicole Lee, for tonight. And I also want to thank Encompass Community Services and Disabled Mums for supporting tonight's event. We would also like to thank our Auslan interpreters, Priscilla and Jamila. We've got This is published by Black Books Inc. and is available to borrow from Geelong Regional Libraries in hard copy, audiobook and ebook format. You can also purchase the book online. We have posted the link to purchase that into the chat here. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Please have a wonderful evening and enjoy the book.
Thank you.
Thank you.